there's a little bit of calm happening this weekend, Friday, December 26th through Sunday, December 28th, astrologically. There aren't a lot of major transits happening now. Just Mercury in Sagittarius, trining Chiron in Aries. This is really a great transit, though, with a lot of positive potential. And I feel like there's something about this healing transit emerging at this time. There's something about the calm and the relatively quiet astrology that feels especially poignant. So I'm excited to talk about it with you today. Let's go ahead and get Mercury trine Chiron on the chart. I like to highlight these different aspects on the chart in the hopes that if you're studying astrology, that's helpful for you. And if you just want to listen and enjoy the astrology and not worry about that, my hope is that this report works for you too, or, sort of anything in between. So we have Mercury here in Sagittarius, trining Chiron in Aries. Mercury in Sagittarius signifies honesty and having a broader perspective, gaining a broader perspective. Mercury in Sagittarius is about meaning, craving those things in our ideas, in our thoughts, in our conversations, that honesty, that perspective, that meaning, and sort of processing the world and wanting to have this element in conversation with others, in our ideas and in our interactions with others. That sort of that kind of a search is what Mercury is after. And then when we're thinking about Chiron and Aries, I feel like Chiron and Aries has really been working with us around a wound, a challenge, around identity, about being ourselves, about being brave, about following our own unique path, about even identifying what our own unique path is, getting started. Wounds around that can surface with Aries, asserting oneself. And we've been working with that signature for quite a while, this Chiron and Aries signature. So we've gotten a lot better at this over time. And because we have a trine here, that's a sort of natural flow between these two energies. They're working together very nicely. They're supporting each other. So I feel like there's some real potential for healing here. So here are for a few sort of more specific notes after some brainstorming this morning about how it could show up. Okay, I have maybe 10 bullet points, quite a few. There's some real potential here when we're blending those energies. Okay, so it could be saying something that feels liberating, that feels like a relief in some kind of a way, or even just sort of acknowledging it in your thoughts. Some sort of a communication or an understanding that feels like a relief, I think that a configuration like this could signify that we're the energy this weekend lends itself to conversations that heal, that help us feel empowered, that reframe something in some way from the past. I think that with these energies in the sky, it's signifying that we're able to speak, we're wanting to speak bravely and honestly, not worrying too much about the consequences, or it's not worrying about the consequences. It's not worrying about that there's going to be backlash, so not saying it, or worrying that it's not going to be misunderstood, so not saying it, sort of displaying that honesty and that bravery in conversation a little bit. Whenever I say something like that, I feel like I'm recommending it, and I don't necessarily mean to do that because I actually think that it's very, very important that we be careful with who we're vulnerable with. I think being vulnerable is very important and wonderful, and I think we absolutely need to do it with the right people And if we overdo it with the wrong people, that can become difficult because, um, it's not about having your guard up. And maybe this, maybe this Chiron Mercury trine needs to work with me. But, just to sort of share my perspective on it for a second, uh, to be overly uh, unguarded with people who um, are more selfish or not of a mind where they're going to use this information in a way that is mutually beneficial or whatever it is. We have to protect our hearts a little bit in this world. And I do think that it's wonderful to speak honestly and bravely without fear of backlash or misunderstanding. But, I maybe it's going to work with me. Maybe it's going to work with me this week because um, I'm careful about who I speak about bravely and honestly with, Anyway, I do think that, this signature is easy. It's good. You feel lighter after, um, after naming something, right? Whether that's through a conversation or on your own, just as the idea through journaling. I feel like the best way could be with another. There's something about this, especially in the context of the rest of the astrology, which really is relatively quiet. We've talked about the Jupiter Chiron square. I have that in another report. If you'd like to check that out, I will link it at the end or it will be on my channel. That is still active here, and that's a healing signature too. Bringing in that safety and security that Jupiter in Cancer has been providing um, uh, to this mix is nice, and that's still active too. And then this is just moon stuff, what's going on here with these squares and these lines. You'll notice I don't really talk about the moon a ton in my report. It's because those transits are so fleeting. They come and they go. And so I will mention a moon in reports if it feels especially relevant. But the transits are so fleeting that I don't tend to stay there. Okay, back to these different potentials for this Mercury trine Chiron. You'll notice I got a little Christmas cut, but it is planet and stars band-aids, so that's good. Oh, I'm seeing some people in the chat as well. Thank you so much for saying hello and for being here. I'm going to spend a few minutes reading over the Q&A, the chat at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them there. I will answer them about this astrology in general, just saying how you're doing. And I'm going to finish up this astrology and then we'll move right into that conversation. Okay. So the honesty and the bravery without fear of backlash. But then a side note from me, maybe to be a little bit careful with that. But it is that feeling better, that feeling of relief, that feeling lighter after a conversation or an idea surfaces, some sort of a realization perhaps. It actually is a great weekend to maybe journal a little bit or to talk to someone who is really great to talk to, who helps you understand things, and to talk about it, whatever it is that's going on, whatever sort of been on your mind, in your heart, on your soul lately, to talk about it with the right person this weekend might be just exactly wonderful, truly medicine. And I also think that journaling is a really great idea. I think sometimes we can be that person for ourselves a little bit and just quieting down and getting some rest, those ideas kind of surface. Because another signification that I wrote down for here, another potential, is that someone else's words sort of landing at exactly the perfect moment. Someone else saying just the right thing. When that happens? This is a transit that could be that kind of a feeling where you go, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. Or maybe you even say, I think other people have even said that to me, but you saying it right now, for some reason, it's all clicking. I think this another potential is just sort of like insight about something from the past, insight about what happened in some way. Um, maybe some self-responsibility in there, but because there's so much honesty, but it wouldn't be with that like heavy feeling of blame. I feel like whenever Chiron is in the mix, we're okay not healing all the way. We're okay not being perfect with this. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be 100% okay in order for things to be better. So insight about what happened, about something that is on your mind from the past, or some narrative, or um, something. And then so precise. And then maybe having that feeling of relief or feeling a little bit lighter as a result, maybe being a bit honest about your part in it, but not being overly hard on yourself, understanding that you're not perfect. We could be really finding the courage to talk about something this weekend that has been avoided historically. That Aries signature does have a lot of bravery. And we're going to be talking about Aries quite a bit going forward because there's some exciting Aries transits coming up, particularly Saturn and Neptune here moving into Aries. We'll have Neptune on January 29th, I believe, and then I'm only a day or two off if I'm off there, and then Saturn on February 13th or 14th, depending on where you live. And they'll come into their conjunction on February 20th. Highly recommend the special episode that I did with my friend Corinne about that Saturn-Neptune conjunction and just Saturn and Neptune and Aries in general. We talked about how it's the most important transit of 2026. I will attach a video about that at the end too. But here, talking about something that's historically been avoided, it also makes me think about how we do have this Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces. And it was getting all of these squares from these personal planets and the sun and the moon as they worked through the end of Sagittarius recently. And I think those squares were a little bit sort of heavier than expected. Neptune at the 29th degree is helping us make meaning of things from the past. There is a way in which we're sort of wrapping up an era now that feels kind of heavy. You might feel that yourself. You might feel like we're sort of a bit at the end of an era. So finding the courage to talk about something this weekend that's historically been avoided, feeling lighter and better about it could be really wonderful. I think also this kind of a transit could just show up as sort of realizing or acknowledging in some way that you're happier or more healed than you thought. Maybe something comes up and you handle it in a certain way and you can really reflect on how far you've come. Or maybe as we're in sort of this lull weekend of the holidays, a little bit of downtime to process, maybe looking back on the past year or looking back on your interactions over Christmas or something like that could help you to realize or acknowledge that you're happier or more healed in some way than you previously thought. When we're working with Chiron, we're turning wounds into wisdom, right? That's sort of Chiron's catchphrase, I guess. If planets and points in astrology had catchphrases, turning wounds into wisdom would be Chiron's, I believe. So that's why we're talking about sort of realizing how you've learned and grown in some way. When we've moved through something, then you can have some wisdom about it that you can really share with others. And sometimes there can be that real desire to want to help others once you have that wisdom. And that can surface with this, even though you're not feeling perfect or like you have it all figured out. This kind of a transit could signify just that feeling of turning wounds into wisdom, realizing how you've learned and grown, and maybe wanting to help others with what you've learned, even though you're not perfect about it yet. There's the potential for more confidence here, I've mentioned that before, but I think it being sort of obvious to others could be what this transit is signifying, seeing it uh, in your opinions, in your beliefs, in your voice. Yeah, there's something very potentially sort of validating about talking about what's going on right now. There's the potential for conversations to really help you feel validated, where words can sort of be medicine in some kind of a way. I do want to acknowledge that sometimes when Chiron is activated, even if it's in a trine, even if we have this lovely trine between two fire signs and Chiron is so mature and has learned so much working through Aries, um, sometimes there could be sort of more of a focus. It could feel like this is about the wound, not about the healing. Sometimes when something is healing, we can sort of feel the wound more than the healing. Right? But it might be helpful if you are feeling the wound. And I think the holidays can be a difficult time for many people for many different reasons. And for a lot of different reasons, different things happening, we might be more aware of what hurts than on the fact that we're working through it. But maybe if that is what's coming up for you, try to acknowledge that healing that really is sort of right under the surface of it. But I just think it's always good with Chiron to um, be real about the fact that sometimes we feel the wound instead of the healing. It is interesting that this is happening in such a quiet sky where, really the only other stuff we have going on is moon stuff. So, um, I think that pulls the focus there. It's also just been a little bit of a quiet sky. It was on Christmas Day as well, on the 25th. So there's sort of it's a good time to go a little slowly, to maybe get a little rest if you could. There really is some exciting astrology on deck, especially as we get into late January, which is right around the corner at this point. So sometimes it's interesting when the sky is a little quiet that you go, okay, yeah, what's happening next week or next month? Because that all might be right behind it. So, um, all right. I want to go ahead and take a look at the chat now. And I also wanted to say, connected to the chat, that um, was it last video? It was a couple ago. I barely got to look at the comments from my last video, my last podcast, but two or three episodes ago, I just loved the conversation that was happening in the comments about the sort of funny things I was mentioning about the different signs, like how Virgos really love to make lists and Sagittariuses enjoy high ceilings and um, and are often recommended to be psychiatrists or psychologists in some kind of a way. I actually don't know if I said that. I think someone said it in the comments, but that is something that I say. But I don't think I said it in the report. But yeah, the Sagittarius signature with that philosophical uh, leaning and also that optimism and ability to see people's highest potential. It's like they're optimistic and they can see how everything's going to be okay. They're like the best person for helping with that in some way. I mean, there's so many different signs, so many different things to all the different signs, but I enjoyed those conversations in the comments, as I always enjoy the chat and the comments. It's so nice. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in terms of Chiron, I think someone's asking to sort of define Chiron. I sort of did a little bit at the beginning. I think it's interesting to think about Chiron and Aries specifically, and the way in which um, Chiron and Aries helps us to work on those wounds around an Aries signature. Going first, being brave, what we want, finding our identity, asserting ourselves. Those are the kinds of signatures that we're working with Chiron and Aries. Thank you all so much for being here. Hello to Tyrone. Yeah, people are asking about, is this a positive time for Sagittarius? Nice to see you here. Deep Haldar. Check out your horoscopes on my channel. That's the best place to go for more specific information. If you know your rising sign, watch them by your rising sign. And if you don't, watch by your sun sign. That's the next best thing. Yeah, again, with the Aries note, definitely check out your horoscopes on my channel. I did 2 months together. I did December and January together. So you might want to have a look at that. And also, I did these little short 3 key transits for 2026. I'm still in the middle of that series, but Aries through Virgo is up. If you want to check those out too, these give a little bit of a longer range perspective. And I also just want to say what I always say, which I'm sure you're all tired of hearing if you've been here a bunch, but just that, you know, astrology is a great tool. It's a really interesting tool that we can use for introspection, for personal growth, through asking, you know, different questions about the world and considering things from new angles. And the most important thing we can do is do our best every day to move forward on our goals. And that is way more powerful than anything with the astrology acknowledges. You know, I never want astrology to be something that makes people feel disempowered, where you feel like your power source is outside of you, where you feel like, where you externalize that power and that things happen to us. It's not really like that. We make things happen. But studying what's going on with the astrology can provide some insight, some different ways of seeing things, you know, some ways ways of thinking about what might be going on for us that can be helpful. And you know, I think it's so good to hold astrology in that sort of middle place where we take it seriously, but not too seriously. And that's difficult. And I've noticed more and more, I think it's with the end of the year and the beginning of another, people are thinking about, oh, what's going to happen next year. And I've been noticing sort of more astrology anxiety come up. So don't do that. The most important thing is what you do. So using the astrology to sort of help us ground ourselves in that, in our goals, in what we want, giving us a different way to sort of think about things. I don't know. It's very, very helpful. And it's very interesting, I think. I am going to attach a couple videos here. Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Monday, and thank you, Madonna Grogan. I also want to thank my members so much. Natalie, Love, Patricia, Brittany, Mouch Vesta, Lucy, and Virginia. I appreciate you guys so much. I do have just a few sort of members only videos that I put out very occasionally. Please know that the horoscopes on this channel and this podcast will always be available publicly. I'm never going to put anything like that behind a paywall. These membership videos are really just behind the scenes stuff, kind of very casual, and just that kind of videos that I don't think necessarily all of YouTube would enjoy. But if you're in this community on this uh, channel and you really like it, that you would be interested in those members only videos. So that's why I listed them that way. But you're not missing anything with the astrology in terms of horoscopes, in terms of podcasts, if you're not subscribed to that. And this will always be available publicly on YouTube. Love YouTube. All right. I appreciate you all being here, and I hope you have a really nice weekend. And I think that's it for today. Thanks so much.